The Battle of Fitjar, battled in southern Norway in 961, was a battle between King Haakon the Good, when the cultivate child of King Aethelstan of England, and his nephews, the children of Eric Bloodaxe. The Viking Age was a fierce period both inside Scandinavia and in the broad grounds the Vikings voyaged. As indicated by a pattern of 13th-century Norse adventures, the Heimskringla, the siblings had made customary, if fruitless, endeavors at guaranteeing the Norwegian royal position for a considerable length of time. In spite of the fact that Haakon indeed repulsed their test, Fitjar would be his last fight. He was to kick the bucket not long after from his injuries. A sonnet called Håkonarmal, words about Haakon, created in the dead lord's memory by a writer in his entourage, ascribes his destiny to the desire of two Valkyries, Gondal and Skogul. The sonnet discloses to us that, in spite of the fact that the pair chose to give Haakon's side triumph, they guaranteed the pioneer himself for Odin, the Norse divine force of war. As it were, the result of the fight was not dictated by military strategies or ability, rather, triumph and individual endurance relied upon a higher force. The Vikings, famously known as manly battling machines who knew no dread, saw this force as female. Haakon, who had spent a lot of his childhood at Aethelstan's court in England, was an early adopter of Christianity in Norway. However, Håkonarmal is saturated with the agnostic convictions to which the vast majority of his subjects despite everything bought in. In the Norse conviction framework, Valkyries were extraordinary ladies who figured out who lived and kicked the bucket on the front line. Along these lines, they would take a select gathering of the killed warriors riding a horse to Odin's corridor at Valhalla, where they would join the Einherjar, the restrictive entourage who battle for sport during the days and banquet around evening time. It is anything but difficult to see the attractions of such an existence in the wake of death, in which a man never goes eager and battling is a type of amusement, without any results, in any event for the individuals who had a place with the warrior class. The Edda, a coarse book about Norse folklore written in the 13th century by the Icelander Snorri Sturluson, claims that the Valkyries served drink to fallen warriors in Valhalla. Be that as it may, more established sources, which are nearer to what the Vikings thought and accepted, ordinarily stress the Valkyries' warlike viewpoints and their organization over life and demise. Viking artists allude to them as blade young ladies, skewer ladies, and goddess of the lance blade. One sonnet saved an Ingjald's adventure even envisions a fight as the natural sign of the Valkyries weaving in the otherworld, utilizing weapons as their instruments and guts as yarn. Valkyries have the ability to offer triumph to one of the warring sides, a capacity typified in the depiction of a fight as the Judgment of Gondal, an allegory which analyzes the conflict of two armed forces to a court where the two sides contest. However, one gathering is at last given triumph by an adjudicator, the Valkyrie. The figure of the Valkyrie brings up issues. Any place we look in Viking history, regardless of whether in adventures, fantasies, picture stones, or the prehistoric studies, Viking fighting is a male-commanded circle. Why, at that point, did the Vikings accept that the creatures which directed fights and settled on choices about who should bite the dust were ladies? One answer develops on the off chance that we think about the circumstance from the perspective of a Viking lord. Lords expected to marshal enormous hordes of men ready to battle, and perhaps bite the dust for them. They required their warriors to get tied up with the possibility that demise on the war zone was optimistic as opposed to awful. Alongside administering endowments and titles, rulers accomplished this by developing a military philosophy, incompletely by having the artists in their administration whose activity was to compose stanzas that advanced a brave warrior mentality. Håkonarmal is a piece of this Norse convention. Delighting in the greatness and excitement of war, the writer accentuates the lord's valor and skillful battling, and the portrayals of the fight, blades clanking, shields conflicting and blood spilling, are distinctive. Inevitably, Gondel and Skogul's choice is completed and the Valkyries ride to Valhalla to declare the Lord's approaching appearance. With their significant control over death, the Valkyries have their very much characterized influence in promulgation expected to persuade individuals to forfeit their own life, or that of others. In legends about Valkyries we see an endeavor to raise the platitude of war, to make the agony in enduring, the lost appendages and deformations, the heaps of dead bodies, sublime and advantageous. The irregularity of who is hit by a flying lance or bolt, and who isn't, is excused as a warrior's fate and favorable luck. The intentional decision of a powerful being sent by Odin. In spite of the generalization of Vikings as dauntless warriors, the Valkyrie likewise draws in with the anxieties a portion of these men may have had about doing battle, maybe for a considerable length of time, many leaving their spouses and family behind. Hakonarmal opens with the striking picture of the two Valkyries heading out to the fight when it is going to start, before moving rapidly to a gallant representation of the ruler and his military. Lances waved, the regal standard flying. Be that as it may, after the fight, as the mortally injured ruler lays dying, he has a discussion with Skogul, asking her for what reason things happened as they did. It is difficult to tell whether the artist plans Hakon's words to communicate incredulity, outrage or dissatisfaction. However, his explanation that we were deserving of increase from the divine beings proposes that the ruler felt hard done by. This uncertainty may clarify why artists now and then take the Valkyrie a milder way, speaking to her as agile and appealing. For example, the sonnet Rafnsmal, Words of the Raven, relates the glorious military achievements of another Norwegian lord by method of a discussion between a raven and an ethereally lovely Valkyrie. She has white light hair and light complexion. Different writers envisioned the Valkyrie as a gushing darling, excited for the warrior's sentimental and sexual nearness in any event, when he is a carcass. In sonnets about the incredible warrior Helgi, hunting slayer, his lady, the Valkyrie Sigrun, doesn't need him to kick the bucket. So as opposed to satisfy her job and sentence him to death, she drifts in the sky during fights and secures him. Thus, the Valkyrie sees Odin not as her pioneer as is customary, but instead as her adversary for Helgi's devotion and consideration. Despite the fact that Helgi is spellbound by the Valkyrie, their ensuing marriage appears to cause Sigrun to lose her forces and in this manner her charm. At the point when he at last dies in fight, she attempts to urge her significant other to stay in his entombment hill in an undead state with the goal that they can keep on being as one. Ever the warrior, Helgi picks Odin and Valhalla over the great beyond with Sigrun. Helgi and Sigrun's relationship alludes to the pressures inborn in warrior life, with clashing requests and loyalties to one's top dog and family. The legendary Valkyrie along these lines reveals to us something about Norse society past fighting. In particular that ladies had organization and were viewed as significant, in spite of the fact that the proof recommends that ladies were not equivalent to men on an auxiliary level. Adventures and sonnets frequently portray them as their spouses, confided in consultants. Some overwhelm their male family, regardless, urging them to take up weapons or conciliating them before they aggravate an emergency. In any case, they are not frail. Ladies were regularly covered in magnificence, and their status is likewise shown in the proof of runestones, dedication stones brought up out in the open spots once in a while financed by ladies. The Valkyrie, a focal idea in the brutal occasions of the Viking Age, would not have existed, nor had such intrigue, in the event that she hadn't had some premise in the way of life from which she rose.